First, this is a substantive forum here today, but we do meet in a political season. So let me address that. As Will was outlining, the preeminent issue in this election is the economy. People are focused more on domestic issues than international issues. But I still believe that national security is a threshold challenge for any party and for anyone who aspires to the presidency. If people don't trust you with their lives, they're unlikely to trust you with anything else. And so it is something that we need to address. I think Barack Obama has done that very well. He has proven to have superior judgment on issues about whether to go into Iraq, how to get us out of Iraq, the importance of Afghanistan, engagement with Iran. You can kind of go down the list, and he has gotten the major issues right in comparison to Senator McCain in particular. But there is no reason why Barack or other Democratic candidates should have to labor under the label of a party that is too often seen as deficient on these issues by too many of the American people, particularly out in the heartland of the country where I am from. And I think it's a misperception. But there's no reason why we should allow that misperception to persist. Too many still view us as being weak. Too many still view us as being more zealous in protecting our citizens from the excesses of our own government than protecting them from the potential evil that could be perpetrated on us by those who wish us harm. And that is a perception that we need to change. As Will was mentioned, there is no reason why it should exist. The long legacy of the Democratic Party has been one of both strength and thoughtfulness when it comes to protecting America. FDR led us through to success in our greatest conflict, World War II. Harry Truman was there in the crucible of the Cold War. John Kennedy went eyeball to eyeball with the Soviets in our greatest nuclear crisis. So we have that history. It's only really been since the Vietnam War that we've had this perception that we've had to labor under, and there's no reason why we should allow it to persist. So what to do? I was struck yesterday, and because it will have both substantive and political consequences if we allow it to persist, that will not inure to our benefit. I was struck yesterday on the 7th anniversary of the 9/11 attack with, I turned on MSNBC and they replayed their coverage from that day. Very emotional as you watch the buildings fall again. The coverage of the unveiling of the memorial at the Pentagon with those benches there for the dozens who were killed in that strike. About how events will not allow this issue to go away. It is a dangerous world. We see that every day in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in the tribal areas in Pakistan, with a possible succession in North Korea, with Iran's continued pursuit of a nuclear capability, with events in Bali or London or Madrid involving international acts of terror. And of course, we were reminded of it here at home again yesterday. So much has changed, and we need to have a strategic doctrine and tactical steps that are combined to deal with the new and emerging threats. And we need to enunciate them as Democrats to reassure the American people that we're up to the challenge. I'll just take off a couple of things. First, the doctrine that we relied upon for so long and so well during the Cold War is not as applicable today as it used to be. The doctrine of deterrence works very well against rational actors and nation states. But the phenomenon of global terrorism is really in some ways, our first post-nation state struggle. These are not national entities. As a matter of fact, one of the difficulties is that they transcend national borders. And that makes it much more difficult. And deterrence does not work so well when your adversaries are perfectly willing to die in the pursuit of their goals. They're suicidal. So what do? You have to be more forward-leaning and proactive. Not preemptive, but proactive. You have to harness all of your nation's capabilities. Your economic assets, financial assets, diplomatic resources, cultural resources, as well as your military resources, in trying to prevent, limit, and deal with these problems before they come to fruition. You can't just sit back and allow events to unfold. You do that at your peril. And so it leads us into some different ways of acting. This is also an asymmetric threat. That's a fancy way of saying it's not a level playing field. The estimates are that the annual budget, as best we can determine such a thing, if Al-Qaeda is $10 million or something like that, not a lot more. And yet it costs us hundreds of billions of dollars annually to deal with the threat that they pose. The 9/11 attack cost maybe $1 million to carry out, and yet costs us, incalculable human, there's no price tag, but it costs us hundreds of millions of dollars to try and protect ourselves annually from that kind of thing. How do you sustain a struggle that is so disproportionate? Well, you need allies, not because we are weak, but because they make us strong. Allies are a force multiplier. We are not rich enough or powerful enough to deal with all the challenges that the world presents. We need people standing by our side in the pursuit of our own national security interests. And this administration has weakened our alliances in ways that undermine our national security. We need a more robust and muscular diplomacy, not once again because we are afraid of acting militarily when we must, but because in an asymmetric world it's foolish to do that unless you absolutely have to. And so you take a situation like Iran. It is much better if we can harness our allies in the rest of the world to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear capability through economic, financial, and diplomatic means than to have to contemplate resorting to military force because of all the unpredictable consequences that might lead to. And yet this administration has undermined our diplomatic efforts. They're a little late to the table now at the 11th hour, but Iran has made a lot of progress on their watch in ways that perhaps would not have taken place if they had pursued a more subtle and effective approach to dealing with Iran's nuclear aspirations. We have to reform, and Gary's done a lot of great thinking on this, reform our military capabilities. We still spend way too much money dealing with the least likely threats. Our adversaries, some of them are evil, but they're not stupid. The least likely threat to America is a conventional war launched by a nation state against us because they know that that is going directly at us and our core strength. They're more likely to come after us in asymmetric ways. A biological attack of some kind, a cyber attack of some kind, dealing with the choke points in our economy or our finances, system of finances, these sorts of things. Irregular warfare that would wear us down and test American resolve. And yet we spend so much of our military investments on dealing with Cold War era threats rather than the new emerging threats. So we need to focus on things like special forces capabilities, air transport capabilities, our own cyber capabilities, these sorts of things. Secretary Gates is doing a much better job than Don Rumsfeld, but it's still a work in progress. And the next administration, the next Congress will need to continue to focus to realign our investment with the threats that face our